Welcome back, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of Sports Call. Brett Pritchard and Andy Graham here with you, and we'll take your calls on the flip side, but we're here in the Sports Call Hotline, Tiger Communications Hotline segment of the program, and at this time we want to welcome Jon Solomon from AL.com onto the program. John, you with us?
I'm doing well. Yep. Thanks for having me.
John, appreciate it. You just recently wrote an article about the rule change or the potential rule change. Let's just start off by getting your take on it. And you were able to talk with several coaches out there and get their opinions on it. Obviously, Gus Malzahn finally speaks and is lobbying to get it tabled till next year at least, and when it's a rule change year. Just what's your take on it, John?
Well, there could be some good intentions behind it. In talking to some scientists, medical people, researchers, that there is questions out there. Perhaps not letting defensive players substitute, with up-tempo offenses could cause more injuries. That's a possibility, but there's no evidence of it. There's no data. There's been no studies that anyone that I've talked to has heard of or know of. And now even Troy Calhoun, the Air Force coach, who's the chairman of the Football Rules Committee here in the past couple of days, has told some national media outlets that, they really didn't have the medical people in the meeting room there that they probably should have to talk to. And he's sort of backtracking some and questioning whether this should be passed. He's saying that if there's not a safety component, if there's not evidence that it's based on safety, then it shouldn't be passed. I think what probably happened is it was probably a lot more about competitive reasons, about competitive balance between offenses and defenses, and some safety, but probably more competitive. But this year is a year when you can't make rules changes based on competition, on competitive playing stuff. It's got to be based on safety. So they hooked this rule onto safety, and really maybe that's not the dialogue that we need to be having.
Well, John, reading your column or your article, it seems like it depends on who you talk to. You talk to one trainer and they say, that the hurry up, no huddle is more conducive to causing injuries. And then you talk to another and they say, no, that's not the case. Is it just going to come down to, and this discussion goes on for the next couple of years, who's got the better experts?
Yeah, if anyone's really going to do any data and any studies, and that's the thing, that there may not be any studies that are done. Will anything be different a year from now than we're having this conversation now? And there may not be. I mean, if you're going to do a study, you've got to get going. For this coming season, you've got to have the money and be able to, do it well, and perhaps they could do it. But we could be here a year from now if this is tabled, having this same conversation. But it may be a different conversation in some ways, because next year you can actually make changes based on the competitive purposes. And there could be a legitimate debate out there to ask, has things tipped too much in favor of offenses right now? Some of the scores, some of the numbers that are being put up across the country are ridiculous. And there are many people who do feel that it has competitively tipped too far towards offense. But technically, that's not a conversation that's supposed to be happening on the NCAA Football Rules Committee this year. It could happen next year.
Well, yeah, and you make a good point there. And it comes down to, who if you're talking to Troy Calhoun, and, he's the chairman of this committee, and he's already backtracking. We brought up a question of the day today. Will this even come to a vote? Do you think at this point that, this is even going to go any further at all, or will they actually make a vote on it this year?
Well, that's the real question. So the procedures is, so the Football Rules Committee did pass it. They passed it, but it still has to go to an oversight panel on March 6th that has to approve any of these rules, and that's a different committee. But the Football Rules Committee could pull their proposal between now and then. And I do wonder if that's going to happen. When you already see Troy Calhoun, the committee chairman, already sort of backtracking. So you do wonder if that's a possibility.
We've got Jon Solomon on the phone with us from AL.com. John, we brought up also that in the rule, inside of 2 minutes in the first half and the last part of the game, the rule won't be in effect. If they're hooking this to player safety and health, that's basically saying that in the last 2 minutes, we don't really care what happens to anybody. And Andy just brought up a good point that during those times seem to be some of the times that players are the most fatigued. Don't you agree with that part?
Yeah. And that's the humorous part of this, and obviously the hypocrisy of it. Some, of course, as you point out, is so for 56 of the 60 minutes in the game, you're worried about the player's health, the defensive player's health, the substitute, but just not the last 2 minutes of the half when it could really dictate the outcome of the game. Things are exciting. Fans want to see, comebacks. You want to see those great drives. It's hypocritical in that sense.
Yeah, and I just think it's bogus, and that's why a lot of people have been against it, and you've heard a lot of the outcriers against it because that just frankly doesn't make any sense, and we want obviously all the players to be safe and in the best interest of the health, but it's like, let's take the last 2 minutes off from the rule because we do want to see a great finish to a game. So let's just fold it up and toss it to the side. That's why it's hard to make an argument, and a lot of Alabama fans are even saying this. It's hard to make an argument in defense of Nick Saban and Brett Billman, the guys that wanted to come before this committee, that it didn't happen like in the middle of the night or behind closed doors, because it's amazing how many coaches didn't even know this was going on.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, a lot of coaches said that. Apparently there was some discussion at the American Football Coaches Association, I think a rules committee meeting, but I don't think that's before a large group of coaches. It's probably a small group. Gus Malzahn said he wasn't aware of that meeting. I think a lot of coaches were not. So you're right. I mean, the blind side part of it was disturbing to a lot of people. Now, this discussion has been out there for a while, for over a year, about tempo. And even I did a story even in early January talking to Steve Shaw of the SEC, who said this topic was going to be the big topic in the off season. But I don't know if coaches really realized that there was going to be an actual specific proposal, potentially passed. At least the up-tempo coaches probably didn't know that.
Jon Solomon here with us with AL.com. So don't you think that the bottom line of this is obviously trying to get it tied with player safety to get it passed this year? Why wouldn't you want to be open and have this debatable, like Gus Malzahn said? Let's wait till next year. It's a rule change year anyway. I just frankly think that on the flip side of things, the teams that don't like this new style of offense they're having to defend, they want it enacted now because of the impact it could have this year. I think they know that college football is starting to go in this direction, and there's been different styles of offense introduced all throughout time. The wishbone, Darrell Royal, people learn to adapt to it. I think we had a comment on one of our programs this past week where I think people are just jumping to conclusions. This is a chess match. Football is like a chess match, John. The offense makes a move, the defense adjusts, and then the offense makes another move. And I think that's what you would see over time here. I just think you've got a lot of people that are, quite frankly, panicking.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity of football is always, of coaching has always been a compelling part of the game. There's no doubt. And this has been a great equalizer for a lot of programs around the country by using tempo. And it's not even tempo as much as the potential to use tempo. And I think that people maybe misunderstand that a little bit is, we see Auburn a lot, and Auburn doesn't always go that fast. If you look at their plays per game, they're maybe about 74, 75. They're maybe per game, they're probably in the 30 to 40 range. But when they want to go fast, they go extremely fast. And so it's the potential of just getting to the line of scrimmage and having to hold that defense. And the defense, and if you don't substitute as an offense, and the defense can't substitute, doesn't have time to sub either, unless they want to risk pulling a player quickly off the field and they can snap the ball, with 11 guys in the field or maybe 13 guys in the field. So that's kind of the issue as much. But one other point that I think it can't be lost as well is that all of this isn't occurring in a vacuum. And by that I mean the NCAA and the schools are under such criticism and such legal threat over concussion lawsuits. There are about 70 former and current athletes who are suing the NCAA over concussion management. So that is an issue in terms of what does the NCAA do to protect itself, moving forward as well legally.
Well, John, you wrote this article on AL.com. I thought it was an outstanding article. You quoted Rogers' rating. We got about a minute here, so I just have to ask you: do you think the rule should be put in place, or do you think college football is good the way it is, and it should just be continued to be played at the pace that people decide they want to play it, and defenses will just have to adjust? What's your take?
I think it was just disingenuous to pass the rule this year based on safety when there's not that evidence, when it felt like this was more a competitive, balanced debate. So I would rather see, let's have the dialogue out there nationally about whether it's tipped too much towards offense as opposed to defense, and let's settle it based on that, not just on safety, but without any kind of real hard data about it.
John, we really appreciate you taking some time out this afternoon to come on and talk about your article. And I encourage everybody to go on Dale.com and read your stuff. Always